The rejection letter felt like a cold, damp slap. Again. My third application, my third polite but firm dismissal, this one for a small business loan that felt like the last thread holding my dream together. I reread the terse sentences, the jargon designed to obscure and dishearten. The paper itself seemed to emanate a chill. The stark white of the document, a stark contrast to the vibrant colors of the future I had envisioned for my small artisan bakery. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the repeated, almost personal sense of being deemed unworthy, unseen. Each denied door had felt like a physical blow, a tightening in my chest, a quiet despair that settled deeper with every official-sounding paragraph that echoed the same message. Not good enough. I remember the knot in my stomach tightening with each denied door. This latest application was for a modest expansion, a chance to finally hire someone, to ease the crushing weight of doing everything myself. For months, I'd poured every spare moment into the business, building it from a hopeful idea into something tangible, something that worked. The scent of freshly baked bread, the murmur of satisfied customers, the quiet pride of seeing my creations line the shelves. These were the rewards that fueled me. And yet, when I needed a small boost, a little faith from the system, I was met with the same sterile indifference. The bank manager, Mr. Henderson, a man who always wore the same slightly too tight tie and possessed an air of perpetual mild disapproval, had personally delivered the news. He'd explained it with a practiced, unfeeling empathy that made my skin crawl. His voice was low, measured, the kind that conveyed authority without warmth. Market fluctuations, unforeseen risks, current portfolio performance. Words that sounded perfectly reasonable, perfectly logical, until they were the wall you kept hitting again and again, each time a little harder. He tapped a manicured finger on the printed document, his gaze not quite meeting mine, as if the paper itself held more significance than the hopes of the person before him. I'd left the bank that day feeling hollowed out, the crisp autumn air doing nothing to clear the fog in my head. The sunlight, usually so bright and invigorating, seemed muted, filtered through a haze of disappointment. I drove home the familiar route feeling alien, the trees shedding leaves like discarded hopes. Each falling leaf seemed to echo the finality of the rejection. My apartment felt smaller, the silence deafening. The small space, usually a sanctuary of creative energy, now felt like a cage, amplifying my anxieties. I thought about my grandfather. He lived across town, in a house that always smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and old books, a house filled with a quiet, solid presence. It was a scent that spoke of comfort, of wisdom, of a time when things felt a little less complicated. He was a man of few words, but his words carried weight. He'd seen a lot in his life, navigated financial storms and family dramas with an unnerving calm that I'd always admired and, frankly, sometimes found a little intimidating. He'd been supportive of my business venture from the start, offering quiet advice and an occasional, almost imperceptible nod of approval. He hadn't offered money, but he'd offered belief, a far more precious commodity in those moments. I sat on my couch, staring at the stack of bills on the coffee table, the rejection letter a stark white rectangle amongst them. The numbers seemed to swim before my eyes, each digit a testament to my current predicament. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, a weariness that went beyond sleepless nights and endless work. It was the weariness of fighting a battle where the rules seemed stacked, where your efforts were acknowledged but ultimately dismissed. It was the exhaustion of hope deferred, of dreams deferred. I picked up the phone, hesitated, the smooth plastic cool against my fingertips, then dialed. The click of the receiver, the faint hum of the connection, felt like a bridge across the gulf of my despair. Hello. His voice, a low rumble like distant thunder, was instantly familiar and grounding. Grandpa? It's me. Ah, my dear. Everything all right? His voice held a subtle inflection, a question beneath the question, that showed he sensed something was amiss. I took a breath, gathering my courage. Not exactly. I had another setback with the business. The bank rejected my loan application. For the third time. The words felt heavy, clumsy as they left my lips. There was a pause, not of surprise but of quiet processing. A moment where his mind, I knew, was sifting through the implications, assessing the situation with his characteristic measured approach. Henderson's bank, is it? He asked, his voice gaining a subtle edge of familiarity, as if he recognized the name from my previous lamentations. Yes, it is. I see. Another beat of silence, longer this time, filled with unspoken understanding. He wasn't the type to rush to judgment or offer hasty solutions. Would you mind coming over for tea? We can talk. The invitation was simple, direct, a lifeline extended without fanfare. The next afternoon, I sat in his familiar study, the afternoon sun slanting through the blinds, casting geometric patterns on the worn Persian rug. The air was thick with the comforting scent of aged paper and pipe tobacco. He poured 2 cups of Earl Grey, the ritual of it calming, each clink of the porcelain a small counterpoint to my internal turmoil. I recounted the situation, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice, trying to present it logically, objectively, as if dissecting a problem rather than confessing a failure. He listened, his gaze steady, his hands clasped over his teacup, his presence a silent anchor in my storm. When I finished, he didn't offer platitudes or empty encouragements. He understood the futility of words without substance. "You've done well with this business, you know," he said, his voice soft, a gentle balm to my wounded pride. "You've built something from the ground up. That takes a certain kind of resilience, a strength that doesn't come from being handed things." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat, a mixture of gratitude and the lingering sting of disappointment. "Mr. Henderson," he continued, a subtle shift in his tone, a hint of something I couldn't quite place, a knowing undertone. "He's been banking with us for years. Since before he was managing that branch, actually. His father and I, we had a working relationship." My eyebrows rose, a flicker of curiosity cutting through my despondency. "You know him? Our families have had dealings for a long time. Business and otherwise." He took a slow sip of his tea, his eyes thoughtful. "He's a man who values discretion and a certain level of respect for established connections. He's not one to easily disregard a long-standing rapport." I didn't quite understand where he was going with this, but I felt a prickle of something akin to hope, a tiny spark igniting in the ashes of my despair. His words were a puzzle, but one I sensed had a clear, if indirect, solution. "Perhaps," he said, setting down his cup with a soft clink, his gaze meeting mine directly, "perhaps the way the application was presented, or perhaps who it was presented to, could be adjusted. Sometimes, clarity comes from unexpected quarters." He looked at me, his eyes clear and sharp, the wisdom of his years etched within them. "Tell me, did you mention your grandfather's name at all in your applications?" I shook my head, a faint blush creeping up my neck. "No, Grandpa. I wanted this to be about my own merit, my own work. I didn't want to rely on favors." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a gentle acknowledgement of my youthful idealism. "Merit is important, of course, but so are understanding and context. The world operates on more than just pure logic, my dear. It operates on relationships, on history, on the invisible threads that connect us." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small embossed card. It was his. The simple, elegant design spoke of quiet influence. "This is my private line. And Henderson's personal assistant's number. Tell her I referred you. Tell her you're inquiring about a meeting with Mr. Henderson regarding a sensitive matter. Don't give details. Just say it's about a long-standing family acquaintance." The next day I called the number. The assistant, brisk and efficient, her voice clipped and professional, patched me through to Mr. Henderson's direct line. He answered, sounding surprised, a hint of impatience in his tone that quickly dissipated. "Mr. Henderson," I began, my voice steady, channeling my grandfather's calm, his measured delivery. "It's your name. My grandfather's name, suggested I contact you." I paused, letting the names hang in the air, hoping they would carry the weight I intended. There was a palpable shift in his demeanor, a subtle stiffening. The casual indifference evaporated, replaced by a flicker of recognition, then something that looked like apprehension. The slight impatience in his voice vanished, replaced by a forced cordiality. "Ah yes. Your name. Pleasure. How can I help you today?" His voice had acquired a new timbre, a careful politeness that felt utterly different from our previous interactions. "I'm calling about my recent loan application," I said, my heart thrumming a rapid rhythm against my ribs, but my voice even, betraying none of the nervousness I felt. "The one that was not approved." He cleared his throat, a nervous gesture. "Yes, I recall. As I explained the market conditions." "I understand the official reasons, Mr. Henderson," I interrupted, not unkindly, but firmly, cutting through the rehearsed explanation. "However, my grandfather felt it might be beneficial for us to have a more nuanced conversation. He mentioned that your family and his have a history, a long-standing one." I allowed a subtle emphasis on the word history, letting it resonate with the unspoken implications. Silence. A thick, heavy silence on the other end of the line. It stretched, filled with the unheard calculations and reevaluations taking place on his end. I could almost feel him reevaluating everything: the polite dismissal, the standard rejection, the casual disregard for a young entrepreneur with a dream. He understood, I think, that he'd underestimated the reach of the quiet man whose name I'd invoked. He treated me like a nameless, faceless applicant, when in reality I was connected to a lineage he respected, a history he couldn't afford to alienate. The familiar jargon he'd used before seemed to evaporate, replaced by a dawning awareness of his miscalculation. Nuanced conversation? He repeated, his tone now cautious, almost deferential. The earlier dismissiveness was gone, replaced by a keen, if reluctant, interest. Of course. When would be convenient for you to discuss this further? The question was no longer an obligation, it was a concession. We met again, not in his sterile office, which had felt so imposing and impersonal, but in a quiet corner of a small, respectable hotel lobby. The atmosphere was subdued, more neutral, allowing for a private exchange. He was different. The tie still looked tight, a familiar visual cue of his underlying discomfort, but his smile was strained, his eyes darting as if seeking an escape route. He was polite, almost overly so, his eagerness to please a stark contrast to his previous demeanor. He didn't offer the same jargon or prescripted excuses. Instead, he spoke about how the bank's assessment had been perhaps too quick, how they perhaps overlooked certain long-term potential. He used phrases like a review of the documentation and a slight adjustment in risk assessment parameters, words that seemed to be carefully chosen to avoid any direct acknowledgement of what had truly transpired. It was a dance of subtle admissions and implied reassurances. Within 24 hours, I received a call from a different department, a more senior officer, her voice warm and encouraging, informing me that my loan application had been reconsidered and approved, with terms that were more than favorable. The relief that flooded me was immediate and profound, a tangible easing of the pressure that had been building for months. The real consequence, though, wasn't the money. It was the look on Mr. Henderson's face the next time I saw him at the local market, a place where our paths had crossed casually before, usually with a brief, almost imperceptible nod. He saw me, and his practiced smile faltered. He gave a stiff, almost imperceptible nod, his gaze dropping quickly to the floor, a flicker of something akin to shame in his eyes. The casual disrespect, the easy dismissal was gone, replaced by a flicker of embarrassment, a quiet acknowledgement that he had misjudged, that he had, in his haste to be efficient, overlooked a connection that mattered. He'd been forced to confront the fact that his authority wasn't absolute, that even in the seemingly impersonal world of finance, reputation and relationships were currency. He'd seen me not as a failed applicant, but as someone who held a subtle, undeniable leverage, simply by being connected. And he knew I knew it. The knowledge sat between us, a quiet, unacknowledged weight, a shared secret that hung in the air. The doors that had seemed locked were now open, not because I'd kicked them down with force, but because someone had gently, firmly, nudged them ajar from the inside, reminding a man of his place, of the intricate web of connections that underpinned even the most seemingly objective systems. The world, it seemed, was indeed a small place, and one's connections, even the quietest ones, could resonate further than one might ever imagine.